Well, hello there everyone, it's uxwbill here again, and it's been a busy few days since I last made a video. Let's see what I've been up to. One of the first things I did is I got the recapping on the Volvo speedometer done. Probably should recap the clock too at some point because it's running slow and it's got a couple of those gold colored Fraco brand capacitors in it that could probably stand to be redone. The new capacitors ended up fitting quite well, except the larger of the two was actually just a little bit large, but we got it shoehorned in there. And now we have to go ahead and hook this back up. And unfortunately, when my dad was busy taking this apart, he didn't really pay attention to what he was doing. And I have great concerns that he could probably end up smoking something. We have a wiring diagram for the car, so we're not running totally blind here. But he didn't pay any attention to the spade lug equipped wires. And so we've got a couple of spade lug equipped wires back there, some of which are probably for options the car doesn't have, like a tachometer. And we're not really sure which one goes where. We have a couple of spade lug terminals here. This one right here. This ganged terminal right here. And then this female terminal over here. And we're not sure if anything actually attaches to that. So if anybody's got any pointers for a 1987 Volvo 240DL, and more than just what Google can find, because believe me, I've already done that. I just wish that he would have made a note of where the wires were before he took the instrument panel out of the car. But if you have any pointers on where the wires go and which ones need to be hooked up where, it would be greatly appreciated. I will, of course, update this video description with additional information should we happen to go ahead with this anyway and get it done by the time you watch this, which may very well be the case because, like I say, we do have an official reprint of the wiring diagram for the car's instrument panel that should tell us where everything goes, although it's not quite as clear as I'd have hoped. Then there's this. Let me just tell you, this was a job and a half. Of course, it doesn't help that I'm not in the best shape either, and I am, shall we say, kind of round. But I managed to bring this little General Electric refrigerator up here that some of you have probably seen in some of my previous videos, and you've probably also, if you tuned into my BlogTV show, you probably noticed it, although it looked rather blown out and overly white in the background. But I actually brought it up here because it would be so much more convenient to use it up here than it would be to use it downstairs. But now I need to go ahead and flip the doors so that they open, they hinge from the left and open from the right. So yeah, that's not exactly ideal the way that's set up, but I can change that. The refrigerator easily supports both. Just a matter of uncapping these and moving the hinge over, re-leveling the doors and doing things like that. And speaking of the BlogTV show, well, it was quite a success. It was much more of a success than I had honestly envisioned it would be. And there's a lot of people to which I need to give thanks for making that possible, because without everyone who watched, the show wouldn't have been anything, and you have my most sincere thanks. But perhaps the biggest shout out of all should go to YouTube user Weasel2HTM and fellow YouTube user LCheapo100. Weasel2HTM started doing his own show on BlogTV, spinning his records and CDs, and it inspired me to pick up a childhood dream where I'd left off. So I would definitely say, if you liked my show, by all means please go watch his Thursday nights, starting around 5:45 p.m. Central Standard or Central Daylight Time, if you can at all be there. In fact, you probably should have watched the last show, because I even made a cameo appearance alongside Weasel's broadcast, but you'll have to see. Well, you really had to have been there to know what that was about, because it was really pretty funny and it came off pretty well as far as I can tell. And LCheapo100, he introduced me to the concept of these sites such as Ustream.tv, where you can actually do a live broadcast. He asked me to watch one of his live broadcasts, and out of courtesy to him, I did, and it was kind of fun. So, want to thank those two folks, Weasel2HTM and LCheapo100, for A, inspiring me, and B, bringing to my attention the very existence of these sites. Now, since my broadcast, I've actually made some improvements to the setup here. One of the things that I had right from the get-go, and forgive the mess that this room is, this is my computer junk room, and I still haven't cleaned up the area where the fridge used to be. YouTube user Max Arcade actually sold me these, there are 3 of these, but there's only 2 of them down here. These 3M pieces of equipment. One of these is a video distribution amplifier, and the other one is a color bar and sync generator. And I actually had intention to use them both, but for my first ever show, I ran out of these little BNC to RCA connector adapter doohickeys. And so the only thing that I could use was the color bar and sync generator. I had wanted to use the video distribution amp so as to assure that everything was getting a good strong signal. And of course the video switch was just a simple S-video switch. Now initially I started out doing this and all I had going was a record player and the CD. And so that's why I wasn't taking requests, because I didn't feel like unloading the 100 or so CDs from my CD changer, and I certainly didn't feel like lugging my complete collection of record albums down here. But what I've got now, this is the trash-picked Dell Dimension 2300 computer system, an old HP keyboard. Underneath that I've got a smaller one of these flat rubber roll-up keyboards, but it's got a couple of keys that seem to have quit working, so I need to get another one of those. And I've got a Microsoft trackball. This is actually going to be my digital music player, because I have basically my whole music collection except for the stuff on tape and LP record. Turn that light off there so it'll quit glaring off the monitor. I have basically everything that's on CD digitized, and some of the stuff that's on records. It's been kind of a big project. So that's what I'm doing with that. I really don't know for sure when my next show will be, but I'm tentatively planning it for next Wednesday. That's not the one that's coming up this week, it's the one coming up next. And if I can get somebody on here, one of my brothers, to co-host with me, because that's the only co-hosting arrangement that I can do, since I'm uploading to BlogTV with the Flash Media encoder for better quality video and sound, I can't do a normal co-hosting arrangement. So to those who ask to co-host my show, I'm sorry, but I can't do that, and that is direct from BlogTV support. But I'm planning on doing my next show tentatively next Wednesday, hopefully around 12 p.m. Central Standard, Central Daylight Time. And we're still observing Daylight Savings Time here. So that those of you who are overseas in vastly different time zones from my own can watch the program and hopefully enjoy it. Speaking of enjoying the program, I forgot to give thanks to everyone who took time out of their enjoyment of the show to participate in the comments area, and especially those who more or less selflessly volunteered to moderate the comments. Most everybody that showed up in the commenting area was perfectly grateful, and I'm glad you were there. But let me tell you something. I've got no use for the trolls. Now I know the best thing you can do for internet trolls is just to ignore them. And that is my firm policy. I suggest that if anybody's bothering you on YouTube or BlogTV or any social media or anything on the internet, best thing you can do, block them out of your life. Don't have anything to do with them. But seriously, and I know some of you trolls are probably watching this, don't you have anything better to do than to sit here and berate my show? I mean, if you don't like it, the technology these days is so cheap. I did everything you see here for well under $100, including all the microphone stands, the DJ mixer, the microphones, everything I had to buy. It came in about a little bit under $100, maybe not well under, but right there. And I think about anybody could swing that with a little bit of effort. So really, instead of sitting there and being a useless heckler, why don't you get off your dead butt and do your own show? If you think you're such hot business and you can do such a better show than I am. All right, I'll see you there. We'll see how you do. I don't think too many of them are going to take me up on that offer, but that's what's been going on with this. Some of the improvements that I've got planned. Of course, I ran out of inputs on my little mixer, so I've got a realistic audio switcher back there. I'm going to have to be careful with that because keeping everything at the proper level might be a bit of a chore, but I figure if I can get everything set to approximate levels that I like, they won't be too far off. Probably am going to change out, turn the light on here, the little Sharp CD player. This is a Sharp DX 670. Not a bad little CD player, but small, very limited, low-end unit. Has a good sound as far as I'm concerned, but one of the problems with it is that it's got a little bit of personality, and it started having that personality on my first show, which wasn't very good. It's not a very convenient thing to have happen, to be depending on your equipment and suddenly have it malfunction on you. Some of you reported that the audio was excellent. Some of you reported that the pitch of the audio tended to warble. Here's the story about that. Some people have been kind enough to give me thoughts on what's been going on with that, and I've certainly taken their input into consideration. First thing I would do, since it seems to be mostly client-end issues, given that some people heard the entire program without incident or with very little incident, I was putting out about a 450, 460 kilobit per second stream. Most of that was the video. I'm actually going to try to cut the video stream back a little bit, and I'm going to use one of the Sony Handycams that I picked up. The one with the working tape mechanism actually went to YouTube user Weasel2HTM. I kept the one that, although it's fancier, the tape mechanism seems to have some kind of a problem, but it should work fine for a composite video source if I can come up with a suitable power supply of some kind. So I am looking at improving things there, but on the receiving end, if you can shut off everything you've got going in the background to free up your computer's resources as much as possible, shut off anything like BitTorrent programs, peer-to-peer networking, if you're using any of that, try to make sure that you're giving yourself the biggest pipe out to the internet that you can have. I'm also going to work on this end, not only at reducing the bandwidth slightly of the audio, I'm going to see if the frame rate of the video can be tweaked down a little bit. Maybe 30 frames per second is asking a little bit too much based on some recent experiences. I might see if I can cut it down to 15, because apparently we're not living in the future yet, and a dual-core Athlon doesn't seem to have enough PCI bus bandwidth to adequately relay 30 frames per second worth of video down the line without dropping a serious number of frames at the moment. And apparently Flash Player gives the video from BlogTV much more importance than it does the audio segment. You would think that they would favor the audio first and just force the video to match the audio by padding or dropping frames or even just letting the video stall, but I guess that's not the case, and I probably ought to ask their technical support about that. So that's about everything I can think of to say for right now, everything I've been up to. Again, I'd like to thank everybody that helped out with the broadcast. I'd like to say get out of here to the hecklers and the idiots who came along, and definitely a big thank you to A, those who inspired me, B, those who made me aware of the sites, and C, those who selflessly moderated the conversation and kicked out the bozos that didn't belong here. Oh yeah, I almost forgot to talk about this thing. This is a new and interesting thing for me to work with. This is an Optimus SCT57 full logic controlled stereo cassette deck from Radio Shack's Professional series, and its big ticket to fame is that it supports Dolby B, C, and S noise reduction. This is the first and only cassette machine I have that actually supports Dolby S-type noise reduction, and it is basically functional. I have tested it out. It dates from the middle of 1995, right around July, and the display is kind of worn, but I think that's because even when it's turned off, as you can see, the heater lines are energized and have probably caused the display to drop greatly in emission and therefore brightness over time. And indeed, some of the most utilized characters in this thing are indeed dimmer than others. It could stand a good cleaning. Sometimes I really think that people ought to dust inside their tape decks. Both bays look like that. It's pretty amazing, really. So the heads could use a good cleaning, probably a little visit from the demagnetizer. But all in all, the speed seems pretty close on it as found, and it does play well with good high-end response, so I'm hopeful that it will come around with a little bit of cleaning and treatment, and I'll probably discuss getting those dust bunnies out of there at a future date. Let's go ahead and have a little demonstration.
I walked around the block and I walked right into a bakery shop, and I took 3 donuts off of the grease and I handed the lady a 5-cent piece. Well, she looked at the nickel, she looked at me, and she said, "This nickel's no good to me. There's a hole in the middle I can see right through." Says I, "There's a hole in the donut too. Shame and a haircut, 6 cents."
In addition to the Dolby S noise reduction, there are also a couple of other interesting features on this unit that are shared amongst both the Optimus and the Pioneer versions of this, as this is just a very, very lightly rebadged Pioneer deck. Radio Shack did not make any effort to hide this thing's true origin. There is the computerized sound enhancement system, which is supposed to be some kind of a computer-driven digital to analog to digital converter thingy. I don't entirely know what it does or how it works because I haven't ever seen that system before. There is a built-in demo display, and there is also an automatic biasing adjustment that Radio Shack and Pioneer both, I believe, use the same name for, Super Auto BLE XD. And when that is in use, you put a tape over here in the recording deck. This is the only well that records. And you tell the thing to go ahead and enable the BLE mode, and it runs the tape out past the leader, makes a couple of recordings of different tones, and automatically sets itself up for the type of tape that you're using. Of course, if you do that, the Radio Shack book for this thing, which is available from their website, hastens to point out that the Dolby HX Pro system, which also affects the operation of the biasing circuit, will not function. Let's see what's in the display, see if there's any interesting unused characters in here. There's partial alphanumeric stuff in the counter area, and yes, those are used. Looks like they actually thought of making both wells record capable at some point. I wonder if such a machine exists. And on the back panel you can see more evidence that it's just barely been rebranded at all. And the control in and out jacks, as well as the CD and deck synchronization control output. And of course the label on the back, which really isn't changed too much from the Pioneer versions, apart from the brand name. It was even made in Malaysia, which is where Pioneer used to make all of their equipment. Looking inside shows a little bit of cheapening having taken place as compared to the cassette changer that I was looking at the other day. There's more strong hints in here that Pioneer planned to produce a version of this unit that was capable of recording on both decks, because over here there are recording biasing settings for the first well. There is also a jumper to cross relay, and over there another jumper to cross relay. Those were probably intended to switch such that it would be impossible to have something bad happen, and to assure that the direction of audio electrical flow in this thing was always appropriate. And of course over here there's an internal recording level adjustment for the right channel. You can see that there are positions for 1 and 2 controls. Only the 2 control is populated. The left channel is of course down there. Now there are ICs on the bottom of this board, particularly the system controller is underneath those 2 holes right there that you can kind of see. I'm not actually taking the board out of this thing because I think that would risk disaster and I'd hate to wreck it, especially since I just got it. An interesting thing is that I found ICs that were not completely inserted into their through holes at manufacturing time on the cassette changer, and this unit has that same deficiency in some places, like this NEC chip right here is not evenly inserted into its socket. So I guess Pioneer didn't quite have their automatic component insertion up to snuff that day. Over here, this little daughter card that you can see is actually the Dolby S processing board. There are 2 Sony CXA 1917 AS chips on there. The data sheet for those claims that in order to provide for Dolby B and C type noise reduction, there needs to be another Sony IC used in conjunction with these, but both the ICs on this board are Dolby S type encoder-decoder chips. I'm not really sure why there are 2 of them. I haven't studied the data sheet in that much depth. The shielded object, they actually tried to maintain some degree of signal quality in here, is actually a Sony cassette playback preamplifier IC, intended for use mainly in portable radios and stuff, but I guess you could use it in a stereo component. And then the last of the vestiges is under here, over by the ribbon cable. You can see there's a headphone jack here. It looks like there were plans to actually make that, make that volume controllable, but they never materialized, or at least they didn't appear on this particular model. Now, some of you who watch my videos and have watched me repair tape decks have reported that you've got a tape deck of some type, usually a full logic type, that shuts down unexpectedly when you try to use it. Well, there's a reason for that. The microcontroller on these things has to know that the tape is moving in order for it to safely continue running. And so what's done, there's a sort of watchdog set up that if it's not petted or strobed, to use the more correct term periodically, the unit assumes that the worst has happened and shuts down. Typically this device is not too hard to find, although there may be more than one of them. And sometimes, as shown in one of my previous kitchen table electronics repair videos, you'll find that one of these tape presence detection switches is actually the culprit. I had a Pioneer deck that had dirty tape presence detection and selection switches in the top of the A well, and that made it very jittery, and it caused it to shut down unexpectedly. But as you can see here, provided I can hit the button, you can see that when this deck is playing, there's a star-shaped wheel that's turning around and around. And what that has shining at it is an infrared diode, an infrared light-emitting diode, and there's a photo detector that detects the changes between light and dark. And if the microcontroller doesn't see that happening, if it isn't being strobed often enough, i.e. a transition between light and dark over and over again, then it assumes the worst has happened and it shuts down the transport to try and protect your tape. So those of you who are facing that problem, you're probably dealing with an issue such as bad belts, or sometimes I have seen those LED and photo detector combos actually go weak, but that seems to be relatively uncommon in my experience. So if your deck is shutting down unexpectedly, there's something that you can look for in an effort to try and fix it. Well, thank you all for watching. You folks have a great day or evening, depending on where it is in your part of the world, and definitely do feel free to leave a comment.